But what's actually really interesting about this trend that we're seeing is that Asian Americans are increasingly voting for the Democratic Party. So if you go back to 1992, over 70% of the Asian American vote was actually going for the Republican candidate. Fast forward to 2012, over 70% is now voting for the Democratic candidate. It is the only group that has experienced this massive change in such a short period of time. And additionally, just on a personal level, if I talk to really any of my friends or their parents or their grandparents, we all have this prior that Asian Americans actually vote for the Republican Party because we all grew up sort of in the 80s and 90s when that was in fact true. So when we found that that was not actually true today, we thought that was a really interesting question to really look at. And additionally, if we look at political science research, there's a tendency to sort of bundle minority groups together and think that they are all sort of behaving in a very similar way. We're finding that Asian Americans are actually quite unique beyond just how they are voting. In fact, when we look at demographics, they are a group that tends to have higher income levels than any other group in the country, higher education levels. And so when we look at these different demographic characteristics, you can't just say that they're exactly the same and think that we should bundle them together. One additional component is that it is a group that's increasingly important because it's the largest immigrant group in the country now. So if we're looking at just inflows of who's moving into the United States, the number one sort of source is the Asian continent. So it's becoming an increasingly important group, which means that it's important to actually understand who they are and how they're actually participating in the American political process. So we think there might be something about how Asian Americans are perceiving anti-minority sentiment. So when one hears comments that say Asians are not American, that they are viewed as foreigners, that there might be something going on in one's mind that actually links that kind of sentiment increasingly with the Republican Party. So that is one explanation, and we try to see if there was any truth to that by running an experiment in a laboratory setting. And something that we're hearing a lot about in the news as of late are these comments called racial microaggressions. So these are not these overt racist type of remarks. They're very subtle. I think individuals today know that it's politically incorrect to say something blatantly racist and say that you're not welcome here. However, people might still unintentionally often say things that might make a person feel uncomfortable, like saying, wow, your English is really good. And the person hearing it as someone that might have been born in the United States, only knowing this soil, they'll hear that as an odd comment. Or you might just go to a store and someone will ask, where are you from? And if you answer, well, I was born in Washington, D.C., the follow-up question might often be, well, where are you originally from before that? And so when people hear those kinds of comments, they're not blatantly aggressive, but there are these little micro racial aggressions that might make people feel, oh, in your mind, you don't think I'm one of you, and you in fact think that I'm an outsider, and you're making some presumptions as a result. So we took advantage of that experience by having that be the experiment in a laboratory setting. So some Asian American students who came in were given that kind of off-color racial microaggression comment before then being asked a series of political questions. Other students were not given that kind of comment before. And we saw a remarkable difference. Those who heard that off-color remark proceeded to be a lot more negative towards the Republican Party, state more things that they did not like about the party, state fewer things that they liked about the party, and were more likely to say that the party was ignorant, intolerant, prejudiced, those kinds of things. So it told us that there is something that's going on in the minds of Asian Americans today, and what's going on in the political process that's cementing this perception that these racist type of remarks are really something that's reflective of the Republican Party and less so the Democratic Party. There are moments in which policies can be framed where Asian Americans think, I'm more like other minority groups in this country. And there are other times in which policies can be framed where Asian Americans think, actually, we are more like the white majority in this country. So take immigration, for instance. If we go to places like Arizona, where there might be something like a law that involves racial profiling, it is really easy to frame that law as something where Asian Americans and Hispanics all should band together and be concerned that this is something that will disproportionately negatively impact them. But then you go to Silicon Valley, and you see that there are a lot of tech companies that are trying to increase high-skilled visa numbers, the H-1B visa, and they're realizing that it is the Hispanic coalitions that are actually blocking that moving forward because they're sort of holding that hostage in an effort for more comprehensive immigration reform. And the high-skilled visas actually disproportionately impact Asian Americans because over 70% of H-1B visa holders are in fact from Asian countries. And so for that policy, in that way, Asian Americans may be viewed as on the other side of the table with the white majority, with the corporations like Microsoft and Google that are asking for these visas. And so we can frame policies in a way that might enhance intergroup solidarity between minority groups or create cleavages within minority groups so that Asian Americans realize they're actually more like the white majority. And in those situations where they think they're more like the white majority, then the Republican Party starts appearing a lot more positive, and they're less negative towards the Republican Party. While Asian Americans are actually the most wealthy ethnic group in this country, they are clearly, when we're looking at how they're voting, going for the Democratic Party. 73% went for the Democratic Party in 2012 with President Obama when he was up for office. And what's even more fascinating is when we look at within the Asian American population, because Asia is a huge place. It is not going to be the same culturally. You go to South Asia, Southeast Asia, they are not the same. Very different cultural contexts, historical contexts, and even the reasons and modes of immigration to this country is different. And when we look at within variation of Asian Americans, we're seeing a striking finding where the most wealthy Asian Americans are actually more likely to be Democrats than the least affluent Asian Americans. We want to always state as we share this research finding with anyone is that we don't presume that our hypotheses on identity, specifically about social exclusion and intergroup solidarity, is the entire picture. We think that it's probably something with that bundled with these other factors around cohort replacement, immigration flows, geographic location, so how different cities are socializing different immigrant populations. So if we have large groups that are trending towards going to cities that are traditionally blue cities, then perhaps they're being socialized in a way to be more supportive of that party that is the popular party of their community. So we think that is probably a little bit of all of those things.